We have some questions that are fairly similar, so I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to try to combine some of the questions together. B.J. Rogers. B.J., hello? And Kanar Laravel. Thank you. There are two questions. What will you do to get this big ship back on the road to prosperity? And in South Carolina, we have a 10.5% unemployment rate. What is your plan towards prosperity? And they reference Herman Cain's 999.
Well, look, I think, as I said earlier, that we know from the Reagan years and we know from the years I was Speaker that there's a four-part plan that works. Tax breaks that favor job creation, deregulation to favor job creation, focus on American energy to favor job creation, and have an attitude that's positive towards people who create jobs. So let me briefly walk through all four of them. First of all, I believe that we need a tax program that's very, very aggressive, because I think we're in real trouble, and I think as Europe decays, we're going to get in more trouble. The United States is the only economic engine big enough to pull the world economy. And when we end up as we are right now, with bad leadership and bad policies, the world economy gradually decays, and the risk of getting much worse is very real. So I would want a very robust program. My proposal, which is all at newt.org, and you can see it in the 21st Century Contract with America, starts with zero capital gains tax so that hundreds of billions of dollars will be invested in the United States almost overnight in order to create new jobs and new factories. Second, I would go to 100% expensing, so every investment in new equipment, farmers, factories, offices, doctors, hospitals, you name it, all new equipment can be written off in 1 year. The result would be the most modern workforce in the world. We'd have a continuous process of improved investment, and our workers would be the most productive and the most creative. And that's the only way you can compete with China and India and sustain a high quality of life income level. Third, we would have a 12.5% corporate tax rate, which is the Irish corporate tax rate. It has several advantages. First of all, it would bring home about $700 billion in profit that is currently locked up overseas that would come back home. Second, it would make American companies competitive with foreign companies. Right now, we have the second highest corporate tax rate in the world. Third, it would actually mean that General Electric would pay some taxes. The great phoniness of the current system is we have a 35% rate, which means that General Electric hires 375 tax lawyers to find every possible loophole so that their effective rate's zero. Well, at a 12.5% rate, they'd fire half the lawyers and write a check because it would be cheaper. Finally, in terms of job creation, we are in favor of permanently abolishing the death tax, because it is a culturally destructive tax which punishes people for spending their entire life doing the right thing. And I want successful family-owned businesses focused on job creation, not on tax avoidance, because it creates more jobs. And the last thing we do on taxes is we create, much like Hong Kong, an optional flat tax of 15%. So you can either keep all the current deductions, or you can go to a very simple one-page form and have a flat tax, which has worked very, very well in Hong Kong. On deregulation, it's very straightforward. Repeal the Dodd-Frank bill immediately. It'll help every small bank in the country. It'll help every small business. It'll help housing overnight. Two, repeal Sarbanes-Oxley, which has been a disastrous bill, which has increased the cost of business. Third, replace the Environmental Protection Agency with an Environmental Solutions Agency. And fourth, replace the current Food and Drug Administration with a brand new 21st century FDA, whose job is to be in the laboratory, understanding science, and accelerating getting new ideas to the patient as rapidly as possible, not stopping it. That alone is worth hundreds of thousands of American jobs. Finally, on energy, I am for every form of American energy. Our goal should not be energy independence. Our goal should be a sufficient surplus of energy that we could absorb for the world market if something happens in the Persian Gulf or the Straits of Hormuz. We should never, ever again tolerate being blackmailed by a bunch of dictatorships and monarchies who do not have our interest at heart and who are a mortal threat to our long-term civilization. And that means you've got to produce more energy than America needs so you could afford to sell it overseas if, in fact, the folks in the Middle East created an artificial shortage, or if a war created a very genuine shortage. Lastly, I think literally on election night, you'll see the recovery begin. About the moment it's clear that Obama's been defeated, just lifting the demagogic class warfare, anti-American rhetoric will almost automatically start making people feel better. I mean, Chris, we've created a number of small companies. Other people in this room have created companies. Going out and taking the risk of offering to have families dependent on your company for their livelihood is a sobering thing. Doing it at a time when Obamacare is a threat to your costs, the president doesn't like you, there's a constant threat to raise taxes. I mean, you look at everything that's done in this administration to frighten the people who create jobs, it's a wonder we don't have worse unemployment given how bad this president is. And so I would want to reverse that. Somebody has suggested to me that the day after the election we'd have a big press conference and have a sign behind me that says America is open for business once again.
We have about 10 or 12 minutes left for questions. So these are a couple questions from our Facebook audience. I'm not sure if they're here tonight. Dennis DeMartelli, are you here? Or Debbie McGravy, Bobby Brock, and about 4 other folks have the same question. Overhauling Social Security and dealing compassionately with Medicare.
Well, they're 2 totally different questions. Remember I talked about the world that works and the world that fails? And that Washington just seems totally trapped in the world that fails. So I'm going to tell you a little history story. Over 30 years ago, the Chileans adopted a system where instead of transfer payments, you actually saved the money. They've now been saving for over 30 years. They have a savings pool so large that it is 72% of the size of their whole economy. In fact, they're now allowing Chileans to invest outside Chile because they have too much capital to be absorbed by the economy. The average Chilean now retires with 2 to 3 times as much money as they would have gotten under the old system. The government guarantees them that if they are totally stupid or really unlucky and nothing works, that they will always get at least the minimum Social Security payment. In 30 years, they have not paid a single check. Because even in bad years, nobody drops enough to get down to where they would have been. That's how much better it is. And you say, well, that's some foreign country. Okay. Galveston, Texas, by a fluke, did the same thing in 1980. The public employees in Galveston dropped out of Social Security. And here's a great story about the government, about how Washington guarantees failure. In 1983, they eliminated the opportunity to drop out because they had figured out that the Galveston model was working so well that so many people were going to start doing it that they were going to undermine the compulsory system by actually going to a better system, and therefore the only thing Washington could do was stop you from going to a better system. Now, the same experience in Galveston. Even at the bottom point of the economy in the last 3 years, you made more money out of your savings account than you would have made in Social Security. So we're developing a program that's very simple. And I want to say there are 3 other pieces of this you just need to be aware of. The current Social Security system does not build up any estate. So if you are a person who dies, your family gets nothing back out of all the money you invested in your lifetime. This is particularly bad for African American males who have the shortest lifespan of any group in the country statistically, and therefore are the least likely to get back the money they put in. Second, because you don't get any buildup over your lifetime, we have not been creating wealth. So people don't own stock, they don't own bonds, they're not part of the larger economy. They're just waiting for someone to ship them a check. Third, it puts power in the hands of the politicians. This is why Obama in July could say twice, I may not be able to send you your Social Security check. Part of our campaign for the right of younger Americans to have the right to choose. We're not going to force them to choose. We're going to say you have the right to choose a personal savings account model. And part of our campaign is going to use the video of Obama saying, I may not be able to send you your check. And we're going to say to young people all across this country at colleges like this one, Do you really want to spend your entire working lifetime wondering which year the politicians are going to rip you off? Or would you rather control it yourself? Now, we're designing a model in which you put the money in starting with your very first job, the money that you currently pay, your half of the total tax. Remember, your employer matches you. Your half of it goes into your account, builds up for you. It starts when you get your first part-time job. So if you start at 14 or 15, you get 50 or 60 years of compound interest tax-free. And it builds up your entire lifetime. It is your estate. If anything happens to you, it belongs to your family. It's invested in stocks and bonds. So the current estimate is this program at the end of one generation eliminates 50% of the inequality of income in the United States. Because virtually every American has that much money saved up at the end of the time. The average person will get between 2 and 3 times as much money from this program as they get from the current system. You could guarantee the current system as a safety net because almost nobody would need it. So the total cost of the guarantee is scored by the actuary at Social Security is virtually doesn't cost anything. The Social Security actuary, the official actuary of Social Security, scored this proposal and said somewhere between 95 and 98% of young people would move to this system voluntarily because it is so much better for them financially. So here's what I'm proposing. Take a model we know works, apply it directly for younger Americans, make it voluntary so nobody's being threatened, nobody's being coerced. You then eliminate politicians talking about retirement age because it's none of their business. If you want to work a long time, you work a long time. If you want to retire early, you retire early. It's your money. It's not their money. And so you have desocialized retirement, returned it to being a private, personal retirement account, made it mandatory, so it's still, people have to do it. But they're now building up their own wealth for their own family, which they get to spend without a politician interfering. I think it's a model that will work, and I think it basically solves the problem without having to get involved in any of the kind of pain that Washington is so thrilled to impose on people.